Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Just Unsecure podcast series on information cybersecurity matters as it relates to Africa. My name is Babs, and my co-host is O. We're information security enthusiasts and evangelists. Before we start, we just want to say thank you to all our viewers and listeners. The numbers are going up. We've been very appreciative for everything you are doing in supporting our platform. And like we say, we are always going to bring in new guests, new topics regarding information security and cybersecurity. Today is one of those days, and we're bringing to you a topic known as business security architect. Our guest is a seasoned person, and I will let my co-host Yemi tell us more about him.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today. We are always glad to have everybody join us, and I hope you've been enjoying. At every point, please try to subscribe to the series. I will promise that today is also going to be fun as well. So today, as today I've rightly said, we are bringing on someone that is experienced in the industry to talk about business security architecture. His name is Oluwaseyi Ojo, and he's been one of the first PCI DSS qualified auditor, and he's been the assessor. He's always been very good in it. He's an alumnus of John F. Kennedy in the US, and where he has his executive education as well in Harvard University. To also tell you about him, he's also backed his doctorate degree. So he's Dr. Oluwaseyi Ojo. So I now bring him in so that he can talk to us. He's experienced in cybersecurity, in management, and now he's more like you can say he's close to being a professor very soon. So I'll bring him in so that he can join us on this.
Well,
hey, welcome.
Welcome. First and foremost, congratulations. Now a doctor, so we have to say Dr. Oluwaseyi Ojo. It's not just, we can't just be using your name anyhow. We have to put that doctor next to it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good. So again, thank you for coming to this platform. And Yemi has introduced you, and the topic for today, which is business security architecture. It's a new field, so I think most of the viewers and listeners would like to know one thing, and I would like to know one thing as well. What is that?
Well, thank you. My name is Oluwaseyi Ojo. Business security architecture. It's a field, or it's an architecture that helps translate business requirements into simple, traceable, and executable security requirements. Now, underline those three words: simple, traceable, and executable. Already, security is a complex area, especially cybersecurity. So the more complex a system is, the weaker or the easy it's for an actor or an adversary to compromise. Now, this is where business security architecture comes in to actually help in refining and then simplifying, as well as traceable. I won't stop to use those three words: simple, traceable, and executable. Translating the business requirement into simple, traceable, and executable security requirements, in order to make sure that we have done everything that needs to be done from a prudent man rules perspective.
Okay, well, so that's a loaded topic for today. So
I'm sure a mouthful.
Definitely. So I'll leave you to it to walk us through this whole architecture, and throughout the topic, we'll ask you questions and see exactly what it's all about. But please feel free, and let's dive straight into it.
Okay, good. I'm going to be starting off by actually sharing my screen. So can we all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Like you rightly mentioned, the topic that we will be having a conversation or discussion around is business security architecture. And like I earlier mentioned, what is business security architecture? Business security architecture is an architecture that helps, in actually translating, underline that word, translating business requirements into simple, traceable, and executable security requirements. And how does that happen? The picture before us actually helps us to simplify that. Now, it's an iterative process. It's not a one-off thing. So you could see how that happens. And then in the course of this conversation, we'll see how the model that I have chosen, which is one of the models that accommodates so many things, how that model helps businesses to achieve their business requirements. I'll be starting off by actually diving into an introduction. The introduction, this tells us the security breach that has happened in the past few years. I actually took from 2005 to 2020, and we could see the breaches. Now, it is good to note that these were reported breaches, meaning that you could also have some breaches that were never reported due to reputational damage. So for those companies in different part of the world that have decided to say, hey, we're going to report it could be based on regulatory requirements. These are the list of breaches, and we could see that number, and that number is so staggering, so alarming, and no organization or entity will want to be part of this statistics going forward. And this is where business security architecture helps us, helps an entity in not becoming part of any statistics going forward. The source is there. So for those of us who wants to do further research or further findings on this data, we could see how 2020, again, because of the pandemic, how, that number went up. And, it's very, very, very alarming. That's just to mention, in 2020, 101 million records were lost, and that's very, very, very discouraging. But again, don't be discouraged for an entity not to be part of the statistics, like I mentioned. Then you need to adapt and adopt business security architecture model. This is also, as part of the introduction, this is also a prediction that at the end of 2021, which is the current year we are in right now, that will be the data, meaning that per second, organization loses 190, approximately $200,000. So in terms of financial crime damage. So, and most of us, I won't say all of us, most of us are aware of what happened to the Colonial Pipeline, how the CEO had to pay a ransom, and we all know how much that. So again, if an entity decides to be part of these statistics, well, I leave that call to in your hands. So to address, again, what is business security architecture? Business security architecture.
Before you go on,
Yep.
one of the key things that might be going on in the mind of people like me is this getting better, or is it going to get better? Especially when we look at the compromises.
Well, that's part of the question that I always ask myself, and I want to rephrase that your question again. I've always sat down to ask myself, why do we have so much high number of breaches, especially when you have so many best practice standards and framework, from the PCI DSS to the ISO 27001 to the NIST cybersecurity framework to the NIST special publication 853. There's so many out there, HIPAA, Privacy Act, and so many. Why are we? So again, the question remains, something is fundamentally wrong. What is fundamentally wrong, in my own humble opinion, and this is just my personal perspective, I stand to be corrected, is that entities, organizations have not actually addressed the root cause. And what's the root cause? Making sure that whatever best practice standard or framework they're adopting has to be aligned with their organization. Again, most of this framework tells you, what to do, but they don't tell you how to do it. For example, PCI DSS, for example, would tell you, you must perform a quarterly scan, but it doesn't tell you how to do your quarterly scan. It doesn't even tell you what to look out for, and even if it only tells you, hey, the requirement tells, hey, remediate any vulnerability that is below this number. But the question remains that has an entity, as an organization, have you actually sat down to measure what is our own risk appetite? What is our own risk threshold? Does it align with, because your risk threshold may not be the same as what any of the best practice standards tells you to. Because again, we all have our body immune system, our body immune level is different. We may come from the same family, we may be born from the same mother and father, just to use that as an example. But that doesn't mean we're going to have the same immune system or immune level. So organizations operating in the same industry, in the same space, have you actually sat down to say, okay, this is our risk threshold, and you continuously, underline that word, continuously monitor and monitor that risk threshold, because your risk threshold or your risk appetite may change. Again,
absolutely.
Next question is, have you actually, as organization, actually ask ourselves, are we risk averse or risk lover? That also helps in your risk appetite. If you're a risk lover, your risk appetite is going to be high. If you're a risk averse, your risk appetite is going to be so low. And that is where you can then, put in place a model that says, hey, anything, and then you measure that model against your risk appetite, not the other way around. So again,
right.
This is just one of the things I've come to identify as one of the root causes. There are so many others, and because of the risk appetite, that organizations also don't have good security culture in place. Again, that speaks to organizational culture.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So what is business security architecture? Business security architecture helps translate, again, let's underline that word, translates the business requirements into simple, traceable, and executable security requirements. Business security architecture, number one, understands the needs and the risk. Business security architecture just don't, because everything stems from the business viewpoint. What is the business need? What is the business risk? Again, what was the business requirements? What are the business requirements? Business security architecture also supports business goals and objectives, because without the business, there's no security. So security should be out to protect the business. Business security architecture also protects the business assets. From my practitioner experience, I've come to realize that organizations don't even have a good overview of their assets, their business assets, because it's scattered all over. Now, with the advent of cloud, people have assets spread all over, especially for organizations that have on-premise and are also operating multi-cloud. So again, if you don't have a good view of your asset, if you cannot identify those assets, if you cannot properly say, okay, my asset is here, here, and there, then how do you protect them? And your asset is not just the laptop. Your asset, what makes the laptop an asset is the information that resides on it, the business information that resides on it. So again, your server is not just the operating cost that you pay on the server. It's the information that resides on that server that makes it, an asset. So again, another key area which most organizations don't focus on. Process is also an asset, because the process in which, you access that information. It's also an asset because if a process breaks, it affects things like availability. It can also open that organization up to a breach. So again, assets is not just the physical infrastructure. Asset, could either be the technology, could either be the process, could also be the people. So again, this is a part of what business security architecture looks at before, in helping to protect. It also aligns security with business strategy. It aligns the security of the organization. Some organizations don't even have a security program. So again, business security architecture helps you to come up with that, in terms of, okay, this is how your security program should align with your business strategy. Again, business security architecture helps in achieving, business success, because again, like I said, without the business, there won't be security. Security is whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's information security, whether it is network security, it's out to protect the business. Again, why business security architecture? Business security architecture enables the business. It's an enabler of the business. It's also an enabler of technology. It's not anything. It's also an enabler of change, meaning that if there's a change in your risk appetite, if there's a change in your threat landscape, it is easily, the business can easily integrate that, the change or changes into the architecture. Because again, your architecture, makes room for traceability. And because you're constantly monitoring, you're constantly measuring, you're constantly reviewing, it helps that change to be seamless. Business security architecture also helps, it doesn't restrict the interpretation of security to what we all know, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. No, it looks at accessibility. It looks at monitoring. It looks at so many things, which again, our case study is going to help us in driving home how that is done. It adds values, business security architecture adds values to the business, because again, with business security architecture, it helps you to see your risk. Because risk can either be negative or positive. It's not in all cases that risk is negative. From a security point of view, we always say, it's negative. No. Again, that speaks to what I mentioned earlier on. Organization needs to have identified, are we a risk lover as an organization or risk averse? If you're a risk lover, risk averse, when you're looking at your threat, then you can say, okay, you know what, this risk is negative or this risk is positive. So again, business security architecture helps, any entity implementing or adopting this to look at, risk from a balanced point of view. It improves, performance overall, performance. It helps organizations to improve that. And here I have the case study, an organization providing financial services to consumer. Their business requirement is all services must be available to consumer 24/7. Architects must model, when we're looking at business security architecture, architect must model that architecture from a business requirement point of view. One, the stakeholders has to be identified. The business, because if you don't identify the stakeholders first, then you won't be able to gather the business requirements. Now, stakeholders, you need to know who are the influencers, who are the decision makers, then who are the users. Users are also part of the stakeholders. So in that ecosystem, you need to identify each of the stakeholders, and then you should be able to collect their business requirement. The business requirement of an influencer is going to be different from the business requirement of a user. A user, within that system uses, that service. So for that user, it could be availability. For, a senior manager like a CISO or a CEO, the business requirement could be, for example, a CISO, the business requirement could be, it has to be protected. So you could see the different business requirement from different viewpoints. So ability for you to collect those requirements is very, very key. And then one also needs to be able to identify things that matters to the stakeholder, which again, that's where the attributes comes in. Now, the attributes are not just limited to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. No, because of the different roles of different stakeholders within that ecosystem, their business requirement is different. So that is what will now help you in identifying that, hey, these are the things that matters to this stakeholder, and it must be documented. I'll be decomposing this architecture using the 6 honest serving men questions, which are the what, which looks at the assets, the why, which looks at the motivation, the how, which looks at the process, the who, the people, the where, the location, and when, the time. It's good to mention that this model, the business security architecture, can be applied to any entity, meaning that if you have your assets on-premise, if you have your asset in the cloud, if it is hybrid, if it is hybrid means you're connecting some of your on-premise or on-premises assets with the cloud. So this model, it works very well. So irrespective of, even if you don't have any on-premise asset and you're multi-cloud, this model still helps you. But again, ability for you to adopt and adapt it to your organizational need is what is very, very important, and that cannot be overemphasized.
I like the approach very much because you just touch very important part that is critical for some of the practitioners, because some people are only focused on, I'll take this approach for this, I'll take this approach for this, but most people do not have a universal approach to security. While you can adapt as you go, you can modify, but at least the base have to almost be uniform, so that at least when you're pulling in data over time, you can answer the same question across. So it's easier for you to move and to adapt into the structure. I think I really like that.
Correct. So we're going to be looking at the model itself. Now, this is a model that was actually, it's based on SAPTA metrics. It's not my personal model, so the source, and I give that to the SAPTA, which is the Sherwood metrics. Now, if you look at it, the 6 honest serving men questions are what you have on the top, which is the what, the why, the how, the who, the where, and the when. But if you look at it to the left, you have the different architecture, which is the contextual, the conceptual, the logical, the physical, the component, and the set. Now, this is what makes this model very, very interesting and very, very strong and powerful. And again, if entity tends now, each of those architecture has a different perspective. Now, the first one, which looks at business decisions, which is the contextual. It looks at the business decisions. Okay, what asset? The question that needs to be addressed is, what asset are we trying to protect? And this is where you begin to gather the business requirement. What assets are we trying to protect? Because that's a business decision. Now, if we look at it from that case study, the business requirement is, they want their service to be available 24/7. That is more like the overall. But again, at the contextual level, which is at the contextual architecture, the CISO's business requirement will be different. The chief financial officer business requirement will also be different. The CIO business requirement will be different. So now, how do you ensure you harmonize these 3 viewpoints the CIO's viewpoint, the CFO's viewpoint, the Chief Information Security Officer viewpoint. Mind you, the overall, which is ensuring or providing service 24/7 to consumer, could be the CEO's objective that, oh, we're in this business, but we want our services to be available 24/7 to all our consumers. So again, each of these three officers, which are also part of the key stakeholders, will now take and then come up with their own respective viewpoints, which will now give birth to their business requirement. So like I made mention earlier on, that ability to identify the key stakeholders is very, very important, which again may not be available in those other majority of the best practice standards and framework. Emphasis could be on information security, No, here, in fact, at this level, I can then begin to say, hey, based on the different viewpoints from CIO, CFO, CISO, what other best practice standard can I go and then bring in? We're going to see that part, how you can go to those other standards like NIST Cybersecurity Framework, PCI DSS, ISO, and then bring the complete standard into this model, and which will help you in addressing those business requirements. The next is the conceptual framework. Now, the conceptual framework is where the architecture now, and at that point, what you're trying to do is you're trying to come up with the business the attributes. Now, the attribute could be availability, the attribute could be accessibility, the attributes could be protected, the attribute could be monitored. Again, the attribute could also be privacy. Again, privacy, from a legal point of view, it could be, hey, privacy, how do we ensure that, the consumers, the information they are providing to us, we are able to follow the privacy law, GDPR, for example. So again, different stakeholders each stakeholder has its or her, attributes, which again, you can see how the cascading is now coming down. The next point, which is the logical architecture. The logical architecture looks at, okay, the inventory of our assets. Are they on-prem? Are they in the cloud? If they're in the cloud, are we operating multi-cloud perspective, or are we operating a single tenancy, or are we operating a multi-tenancy? You can see how this is now taking shape. Now, at the physical architecture, look at the data assets. Again, how do you do your inventory, which again speaks to the logical. Now, when you now come down to the component from the physical down to the component, that is when you now begin to apply, okay, do I need technology? If yes, then what kind of technology do I need to provide? And so on and so forth. So at the service management, what you are trying to do is ensuring the operational and the continuity. So at that point, you're not building again. It has already been built, but you're providing that assurance that what you have built is operational and the continuity of it. So at that point, prior to that point, at the component architecture, I'm going to be thinking of how do I bring in my business continuity? How do I ensure my privacy? How do I ensure the protection? You know why I'm doing that at that level? Because at my business attributes, which is the conceptual architecture, those are some of the attributes that I've identified from different stakeholders. So I need to then begin to apply what can I put in place? Technology, process, the people. So if you follow that the what, the why, every column has what it addresses when it comes to each of the architectural view. So again, if you look at it, it's so huge, because at the end of the day, you have 6x6 metrics, which gives you 36 questions or more that you may need to answer, and each of them has a unique area that they address. The contextual focuses on the business decision, the business risk, the business processes, the business governance. the business location. Again, that is where you begin to look at it. Okay, my on-premise, especially under the location, my on-premise, how do I ensure, is my data center on-premise or is it in the cloud? How does my cloud, so again, it looks at all that. So it's a robust model that helps, every entity. And that is, if it's good to mention emphatically, if organizations can adopt and adapt this model. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. No, it has to be adopted and adapted because it simplifies, it helps traceability, and it also helps, in executing, because it will help you to also come up with who is the owner, who is the custodian, who is the asset owner, the custodian, who is also the risk owner, who is also the risk custodian. And that is where you have under who, the people, that's conceptual. You look at, hey, owner, that's roles and responsibilities. Again, for some of us who have actually followed some of the breaches, there's always this back and forth game being played that, we're not the one responsible, or it's these people that was responsible. So again, then who, there can only be one person accountable. So many people can be responsible, but who again is the accountable? That's the owner. Again, this throws more light on the previous slide, but the difference is in the legend to indicate the business architecture, the security architecture. The ones in blue are the business architecture. Again, the ones in purple are the security architecture. The ones in green are the information architecture. Again, the ones in black are the application architecture. The ones in orange, the technology architecture, because you can see how everything integrates. The ones in red are the risk management, and then the ones in gray are the service architecture. Purely the service architecture just provides that assurance when it comes to operational, provides that assurance when it comes to continuity, provides that assurance when it comes to monitoring and measuring in terms of your KPIs, which again you must have. Next, these are the attributes that I mentioned earlier on. You could see they are user attributes, and this is one of the aspects of the SAPSA that makes it very, very interesting, and that makes it much more appreciable. Now, each of these attributes has different stakeholders. For users, the attributes could be, we want it to be accessible, we want it to be accurate, we want it to be consistent, we want it to be current. Again, at that point where you're looking at the business business attribute profile, you cannot identify the attribute if you have wrongly, note that word, wrongly identify the stakeholders. Now, every stakeholders within, no matter what, every stakeholders within that ecosystem has an attribute that you must identify. So failure for you to identify the stakeholders correctly would mean that your attribute will also be wrong. If my focus is just on the people at the C-suite, I'm focusing on people at the C-suite, say for example, CFO, CISO, CIO, CEO, then I will only be focusing on my management attributes.
Okay.
But as a user, don't forget, for the operational part, it's the user, because the CISO, the CFO, the CIO will not come to operate the server. They don't do weekly patch maintenance. It's the user that does that. They don't do, the CISO, the CIO will not do weekly or bi-weekly backup. No, somebody is responsible for that. That's the user. So again, that user attribute has to be focused on, which again, if I do a bi-weekly backup tape, I want that tape to be accessible, whether it is off-prem or in the cloud. You understand? I wanted that tape to be reliable. So again, that attribute has to be captured, because along the line, especially at the physical architecture, I need to put in, a technology that will enable that attribute. that will enable that attribute. So again, for the operational, you want it available, you want it to be detectable, you want it, for example, if I do bi-weekly backup, how do I make sure that the backup that I've done is available? How do I test? I don't need to wait until there's a disaster before I begin to test my backup. There has to be, a process in testing the backup tapes, whether it is on-site or off-site. So again, it has to be error-free. That's an attribute. For the risk management part of it, again, it has its own attribute. For the legal, again, whatever evidence that we're storing, for example, there's a regulatory requirement in some country that, you must keep anything for the next 10 years, after 10 years, you can then archive it or, you destroy it. But again, while you're doing that, are you doing it in a way that is compliant to the legal framework available in that industry? GDPR is an example. GDPR, one of the clauses expects, the user to inform the company that is keeping the user's privacy data to destroy it at a certain point in time. How do you ensure that when such a user asks you that destroy my data, I don't want you to keep my data anymore, what kind of evidence are you going to provide that will show that you are compliant with GDPR? Because it's a privacy. So again, compliant is there, enforceable is there, how do you manage the liability? So all these are attributes. The technical strategy is also there, and so again, ability. This in my humble opinion, this is one of the areas when it comes to cyber that again, we could see that this is bigger than the traditional confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It addresses that. Don't get me wrong, but it helps us to look at it from a bigger perspective. And this is, one of the reasons why I said this model, this architecture helps you to go to those other best practice, standards, and then bring them in, integrate them into this business security architecture, and then helps you to still achieve your overall objective. So to address the case study, I've come up with this slide. The business requirement is availability of service to consumer 24/7. That's the business requirement. So at the contextual level, I'm looking at availability of service to consumer. Now at the conceptual level, because I've been able to identify my stakeholders, I've also been able to identify their concerns, their business requirements. I've come up with 3 attributes just to limit it, due to the context of what we're addressing. Now, the context, is I'm looking at attributes available. I'm looking at attributes protected. I'm also looking at attributes monitored. That's at the conceptual level. Now, at the logical level, what do I need to put in place to address those attributes that I've identified or collected? Again, look at the cascading, top to bottom. The business requirement is availability of our service to consumer. Yeah. It's a big word, but again, at the architectural level, which is a conceptual level, because I've been able to identify the different stakeholders, I've also been able to gather their own business requirement, and that gave birth to these 3 attributes, just to streamline that. So those attributes are now applicable at the conceptual level. So at the logical level, what do I have to put in place to address these attributes? One, I need to put technology in place to address these 3, availability, protected, and monitor. I also need to put customer service in place to resolve, again, people's error. For example, a customer complained, there's blah, blah, blah. The customer service is there to help resolve that issue. Now, if you look at that, that speaks to the error-free attributes that we saw earlier on under those big attributes. Again, because I want it to be monitored, that's part of my governance. I need to put governance in place, security governance, to say, okay, how do I monitor? Again, if I'm to look at it further, part of my attributes, it's also legal. How do I make sure that whatever is being monitored is monitored in line with the regulatory requirement? Because if I don't do that, which is part of what my governance speaks to, for example, if I'm going to be monitoring my user activities, that is my employees' activities, I need to inform them. Otherwise, a user in some context can say, hey, I'm doing it illegally, right?
Absolutely.
So my governance speaks to that, right? Because I have a documentation that says, hey, anything you're doing using the company-owned device, asset, blah, 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 is going to be monitored, is going to be logged, is going to be blah, blah. So the user is already aware. And not just I have a documentation, that documentation also has to be communicated. The user has to accept. Again, this is where user acceptable policy comes in, out of governance. So you could see how that is being addressed. Now to the physical, as well as the component architectures, I need to have a data center. Now my data center could be on-prem or in the cloud, right? Because that's the technology I want to use. Remember, in as much as the consumer is a service I'm providing, so and the architecture may not go into details how I'm providing that service. Am I going to have, in fact, if we expand this architecture, but for the sake of time, if we expand this architecture, it's going to be addressing the application architecture, which means, do I want to have an app where my customers can resolve their issue, whereby you log into that app and then somebody at the back end, customer service tells, hey, how may I help you, and blah, blah, blah. So it doesn't necessarily mean that my user needs to physically walk into a so-called physical office. It could be resolved depending on, but again, this is just more of a high level, but by the time we go into the details, granular, this architecture is going to be so big, and we will be able to see every detail of it. But again, to address our case study and to also let the users or the audience understand what the business security architecture helps us to achieve. Next, I need to put a help desk system in place. Now, my help desk system doesn't necessarily mean I must have a physical user. I could have a phone number that you can dial 24/7 automated, and then helps you to resolve whatever issue. I can also have an app where you log in once I validate your identity, just to make sure I'm providing the right service to the right person and not to the wrong person, because I can't see your face. And even when I can see your face, I still need an identity, an identity to authenticate that identity. So again, that help desk system addresses that. For the governance, this is where your policies, your standard, your procedural documents comes into place. Now, the good thing is that at this point, this is where the traceability comes in. Traceability helps us to achieve what is called traceability for completeness and traceability for justification. I'm going to explain that. Traceability for completeness, it's a top to bottom approach, meaning I'm going to drive from the contextual to the conceptual to the logical to the physical to the component, and then you won't see the service management architecture. Remember, that is more of assurance for operational, meaning that I need to give that assurance, to these 5 layers, that in terms of operational, it's still going to be operational continuity. So at that level, it's like an embodiment of, the service management architecture covers these 5, because what that architecture ensures is it provides assurance that whatever I have built, the continuity of it operating is there. And then I put in my KPIs to measure, to monitor, so that, and that's where I begin to look at my disaster recovery plan, my business continuity plan. So you can see how ISO 22301 comes in here now. You can also see how my ITIL, because when you talk about service management, it's my ITIL. How do I resolve my problem? How do I make sure my ITIL, whichever version of the ITIL, that's the IT information library. So again, this is the beauty of this model. But back to what I was trying to explain, the traceability for completeness. Traceability for completeness is a top to bottom approach, meaning that it helps in addressing every business requirement for security. And it also asks this question: are every business requirement for security met? Don't forget, we started from business requirements. The case study, the business requirement was, we want to provide a service that will be available to consumer 24/7. That was the business requirement, but that's an overall. So the question, traceability for completeness helps to achieve is, one of the questions rather, is, are every business requirement for security met? The second question it also helps us to address is, are the residual risk, is it accepted to the business appetite level? We talked about, risk appetite. Now, there will always be residual risk because you cannot eliminate risk. You can only reduce it to an acceptable level. So traceability for completeness helps us to address that. That is, whatever residual risk that we have, is it acceptable to the business appetite, whereby the business can say, you know what, we can still go ahead and do our business even when this risk exists, meaning that they've accepted that risk. So that is, one of the, those are the two questions traceability for completeness helps to address. The other part, traceability for justification, is a bottom to top approach. Remember again, the first one was top to bottom, meaning I'm going to go from my contextual to conceptual to logical to physical to component to service management. But traceability for justification is bottom to top, meaning I'm going to start from my service management to my component to my physical to my logical to my conceptual, conceptual to contextual. Now, what does traceability for justification, what does it help us to address? It helps us to address every operational or technological security elements, meaning that, every operational or technological security elements, is it justified? Are we justified to have them by, because traceability for justification focuses more on risk prioritization. That is, how does the business prioritize their risk? Meaning that I've identified my risk. I have a risk catalog. But again, I may not be able to address all the risk. You know why? Because I have to prioritize. Some risks are very critical. Some, are low. Some are medium, but some are critical. So traceability for justification helps us to justify every operational and technological element that has been implemented. I have seen, some business entity having a multi firewall, that is having firewall from vendor A, vendor B, and vendor C, when they can only have one firewall from one single vendor. This is how traceability for justification helps. Why do I need to have 3 different firewalls from 3 different vendors? Why do I need to have 3 different IPS from 3 different vendors? Again, this is where traceability for justification, because business security architecture also helps us in cost saving. It saves cost for the business. It helps the business to save costs. So this is why, in my own view, I so much embrace the business security architecture model. But I won't stop to emphasize that it has to be adopted and adapted to the organizational, uniqueness, because every organization is unique. The beauty is so enormous that, it helps you to capture value, not just from infrastructure. It helps you to capture business value. Again, organizations may have multi-application. Which one is actually serving the business, especially organization that has just undergone mergers and acquisition. So again, this model will help you in not only saving costs, it also helps you to capture that business value. Conclusion, business security architecture does not presume any of the following. It doesn't presume organizational culture, meaning that business security architecture expects that you align it with your organizational culture. Business security architecture also does not presume your technological platform. It doesn't presume your management process. It doesn't presume your management standard. Reason why it doesn't presume any or all of this is because your organizational culture, your technology platform, your management processes, your management standard, all these will change over time. Let's be honest. All these, for example, there was a time organizations were using PIX firewall, but today it's no longer PIX firewall. There was a time organizations they were using the open source operating system like Linux, Suns, and they just write a script to configure it to run it as a firewall. But today that's no longer the thing, meaning that the technology platform has changed. Today we have the cloud. Cloud comes with its own security controls or technology platform. You have the CASB, Cloud Security Access Broker. Again, all these are evolving. So business security architecture does not presume any of it. Rather, it looks at the business in its entirety. And it expects that every organization that wants to make use of the architecture, adopts and adapt it to, our uniqueness. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you for listening. I'm going to leave the floor open for questions if there's any.
Well, thank you. For me, I have loads of questions, but maybe I'll keep them brief. I wanted you to finish to see whether or not you would reach any of my questions. One question is, you mentioned stakeholders, and is there a process to identify the stakeholders that will be brought into this architectural question and answer kind of a thing? Because obviously when you're brought into an organization to come and implement such architecture, it's mostly the C management that tells you, okay, yeah, we want you to come and do your thing. So is there a process to identify with the users who should play a role in this architectural implementation?
Yes, there is. And from my perspective, and this is just from my perspective and from my practitioner and implementation approach, any individual, or when I'm called to implement such a model, the first thing is for me to have an idea of the business. For example, we talked about the financial service in the case study. In the financial service organization, you will have different business units, right? Apart from the people at the C-suites, you will have different, business unit heads. Apart from the business unit heads, you will have users within each business unit. So as a practitioner, if I'm implementing this, not only would I capture the needs and the expectations of the people at the C-suite, I will also capture the needs and expectations of each of the business heads, especially because the business heads are the owners of that process. For example, you have in the financial institution, you have you may have units that are referred to as loan unit. That is, their own responsibility is to give out loans to consumers. So again, what are their processes? How do they operate? So having that understanding, I'm not saying become a banker overnight, no, but having that understanding and then ability for you to capture their needs and expectation. It's key, because the way the loan business unit operates its own process, it's going to be different from people who, another business unit that looks at financing, car. For example, if you want to finance, car, or if you want to finance, you want to buy a new house and you want to finance it, their process may be similar, but they will have something that is unique to each business unit. So first, identify the business units, identify what are the business requirements of each of the business units, and then also I'm going to schedule a meeting with the user under each business unit to also see, because if I don't do that, I won't be able to address the traceability for justification. Because the whole essence of why I'm having this engagement at the initial is for me to understand their business requirement. As we can see, the business requirement of a CFO is different from a CIO, is different from a CISO. Despite the fact that these three, management personnel work in the same organization, their needs, their requirement is different. So capturing that is very, very important, because that's what will help you to identify the business attribute. That's what will also help you in putting in place when we get, when we're addressing the logical, the physical. I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Spot on. Another one from me is you mentioned obviously SAPSA. Yeah. Are there any other architectural framework and methodology that you align with, or that the business security architecture will align with, such as, again, the TOGAF or any of them, the Zachman or anything else like that? Because I know SAPSA, and yes, the business security definitely aligns with SAPSA, but if you go to are there any other recommendations from your perspective that you assume, okay, these other frameworks will work with the business security architecture?
It depends on what you're trying to achieve. If the focus should always be on the business. Now, because the focus is always on the business, the SAPSA model makes it open-ended. When I use the word open-ended, what I'm trying to refer to is that it allows you to bring in TOGAF. It allows you to bring in even COVID 2019. It allows you to bring in NIST cybersecurity framework. It allows you to bring in the CIS 20 critical control. So again, it depends on what you want to achieve. For example, in this case study we just saw now, there's no way I won't, because of time, I won't be able to, if I drill down, if I'm doing this as an implementation, there's no way I won't look at business architecture, which is from TOGAF. There's no way I won't look at data architecture, which is also from TOGAF. There's no way I won't look at application architecture, which is also from TOGAF. There's no way I won't look at technology architecture, which is also from TOGAF. And then having looked at that, there's no way I won't look at the NIST cybersecurity framework. There's no way I won't look at the ISO. So again,
absolutely,
I'm just going to go to each of these different frameworks and best practice standards to borrow a leaf and then integrate that into SAPSA. Okay. So again, it makes it so rich, so enriching, and also helps me in achieving my overall business objective. Practically, if I'm doing it, I would rather even prefer to adopt TOGAF. You know why? Because TOGAF will help me to capture my needs and expectations of all my stakeholders. From a business architecture point of view, because I need to capture that. What is the business trying to achieve? Again, I would take the complete ADM of TOGAF because I need my artifacts to be in place. Artifacts, they are reusable. Again, that will serve its purpose when I get to the service management architecture. So again, this is why practitioners, not just practitioners, people who are doing operational, needs to not just say, hey, we're gonna implement this standard word for word or figure for. No, they have been built for a fit for purpose. Now, the fit for purpose has to be adopted and adapted. I won't stop emphasizing that. It is not every control which you are likely aware, which you are even aware of. It's not every control in ISO 27001 that are usable. That is why you have statement of applicability. So same thing is applicable to other standards, but even in PCI DSS that you have to apply all the requirements. There are some requirements that the standard will tell you if it's not applicable to you, just write not applicable. So which tells you that the standard or the people who develop the standard are also aware that it's not all the controls that are applicable to every entity. So again, this is where practitioners, I'm going to keep emphasizing, this is where practitioners need to be able to understand what tool, because these are tools, what tools they are using and how they can adopt and adapt it. Customization is very key. Tailor to organization, because every organization is unique. Tailor it to the organizational culture. Don't just tailor it to the organizational culture. And that's why the recent colonial pipeline thing, one of the root cause that I've identified by going through that is they have a very poor security culture.
Yep.
And what that tells is it speaks to the organizational culture as well. So it's very simple. And why do we have so many good best practice standards and frameworks, yet the number of breaches keeps increasing?
Yeah. I'll put that to the culture, definitely. I mean, do you have any questions? I still have some questions, so I don't know if anyone wants to.
No, so straight out of the box is one of the things that he has addressed when he was speaking about how can this help? Because when we take it to the management, it's all about cost. So how easy or how hard to implement this? And what is the cost implication of implementing a business architecture security?
For me, it's the cost. Don't get me wrong. In as much as I'm focusing on the cost, it's not just about the cost. Look at it now. We don't know how much it would have cost Colonial Pipeline to have put in some security controls in place, but look how much they had to pay now after the deed has been done. But do we want to wait till that happens before we pay that million? So why don't we take that time, take that painstaking approach, and then pay either half of whatever amount we're going to pay at the end of the day if we are breached. Again, I strongly feel, and this is just my personal opinion, I strongly feel practitioners are also part of the problem. In this cybersecurity practitioners are also part of the problem in this ecosystem. Why cybersecurity practitioners are more focused on, I want to get that. It should go beyond that. It's more about adding value. Again, especially the well-known, consulting firms. It shouldn't be about paper check. Oh, do you have this check? Do you have that? No, it should go beyond the check. It's not a checklist. Yes, standards, frameworks, compliance may be. In fact, the standard frameworks and compliance should also not be a checklist, because you are implementing this standard not because you want to be compliant, but overall you want your business. You want the business to be protected. Yeah. So you want to add value because imagine if Bank A is vulnerable based on the news you've heard, and bank B is secured, which bank would you want to put your money in?
Absolutely.
Good. So again, that's part of getting more business. But again, the focus is too much on compliance, and compliance is not security. We again, practitioners, and I won't stop saying this, whether people like it or not. Practitioners are also part of the problem. Practitioners will always want to selling boxes. Don't get me wrong. Selling technological boxes or technological stuff is not a panacea. There's a place for technology. I'm not saying technology is not good. Now imagine technology has evolved over time, yet the number of breaches keeps increasing.
Thank you.
So again, we need to look at it that, okay, again, this is where I, as a practitioner, will have done my homework. And if I have the opportunity from any company to say, hey, come and implement this for us. This is the cost. If you want to implement this, this is the cost. If you don't want to implement it. For example, we started off this conversation with data. And I always like to do that so that for you to see, we all saw that data when it comes to, and these are even companies that report it.
Absolutely.
So imagine companies that they've been breached and let's keep quiet, let's just settle quietly so that we don't become another statistics. Reputational damage has no financial value. Nobody can say reputational damage, this is how much it costs. Or no, it's the cost is never ending.
In the week, I heard about a particular company that paid $40 million.
And these are money that are not traceable. So imagine if I had approached such company and say, hey, I can
give me $2 million.
Then just pay me. No, just even pay me maybe 500K or even 1 million. You're too expensive. But now once they are breached, whatever ransom the bad actors are asking for, it's not too much for them to pay. So again, part of the problem in that ecosystem is also people at the C-suites, because they want to save costs. But in the long run, they're not saving costs. Because if you become a statistics, it's no longer a matter of saving costs. You're going to lose more than what you're trying to save. Again, board members, people on the board also needs to, play that visibility role into whatever company they are sitting on the board, whatever they are doing, especially with regards to security, with regards to risk management. It's not just, so again, I've been able to identify 3 key players that are that can be held liable. Practitioners, number one, the management, C-suite management, the people, the board members.
Thank you.
Well, mine was going to be more like, what do you advise people that want to get into this path? Like people, what is the pathway or career path, or what is the best way to get into business security architecture? Or if you have any guidance or things for any of our followers that will listen to the end and like, okay, I want to do this. This is the thing I'm looking at. What would you advise them to do?
Okay, well, you see, business security architecture is a broad field to start with. From what we've seen, it's not just IT. It also looks at it's a broad field. So I'm gonna say they need to start. The first thing they need to have is the passion. Because the passion is for using myself as an example. The passion is what keeps driving me. It's not the financial reward. Yeah, the financial reward will eventually come, but when you're starting off, is the passion. The passion to, the passion and the lifelong learning attitude. Lifelong learning attitude has to be, again, personally, the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. So again, that propels me to, okay, I don't know this, I don't know that. Okay, I need to know it, I need to know that. And the more I learn, the more I feel, hey, I don't think I've learned enough. And so again, that still speaks to passion, because most of the when you are learning, along this part, it's not been sponsored by any organization. It's self-sponsored. So again, investment in materials, investment in time, meaning that for example, as at last night, I was still up till around 2 a.m. Trying to learn some new things as because things will always evolve.
Definitely.
Things will always evolve. Yeah. So again, it's those two things are the things, again, speaking from my own personal perspective, that anybody that is trying to come into this field must have, not need to, is a must have passion and that lifelong learning attitude.
Good. There's one question that also kept popping up on my mind. When we come to Africa,
okay,
looking at your use case, right?
Okay.
When we come to Africa, we've seen major banks, and when they even declare in their annual reports, they boldly tell us how much they've spent on security. Do you think that this is money well spent, or what is it? Or is it actually implementing what we are talking about, or this is new to them that they should adopt or they should look at budgeting for?
To start with, in Africa in general, data validation is a key problem. So the thing is that anybody can put any number in their books. The question is, who is going to validate it?
Yeah.
Not if I stand to be corrected. I don't think even the regulators are able to validate those numbers. We've all seen what is happening, what has happened in recent times. So again, that's where I'm going to start from, because if a bank A in Africa says, hey, we've been able to spend, we spent $14 million on fortifying our cybersecurity or blah blah blah. The question remains that how can I validate that data? It's spent on what? The next question is, do we even have, or does the regulator even have a policy or a regulation in place that mandates banks to report whenever they are breached? So again, it starts from, when I look at those aspects, I want to be data driven. The question is, if today we have an independent, and again, this is where I feel some private entities, especially some private consulting entities, needs to play that key role in supporting, because it's an ecosystem, playing that key role in supporting the regulators. The question is, it starts from regulation. If we don't have a rule or an act that says you must report a breach, no matter how small or no matter how big it is. So it is only then we can compare that, okay, in a year, how, what are the number of breaches that you suffer vis-a-vis how much you spend. So I have a comparison, because at this point, if Bank A is telling me we spent $14 billion, I don't have anything to compare, to benchmark it against.
Yeah.
They may tell me, oh, we have a clean bill of health, but behind the scene, they're going to pay a ransom. So that ransom may have been coughed out from some individual pocket. There was a time, this was I think last year or recently, that I read that one of the banks in Africa suffered a breach, and the people at the C-suite had to task themselves in order to let it die. Yeah, because they can't afford. Yeah, they can't afford to become another. They've actually suffered that breach. They can't afford to get into the
news.
Yeah, into the news. Yeah. And then, they from the CEO to the CFO to the, all those people that they held themselves accountable quietly, and they dole out that money maybe from their personal pocket or from certain funds set aside by the bank. I don't know, but that was what the report stated, even though the report cannot be validated, but I could see some iota of truth in there, because that bank actually suffered that breach from my own personal investigation. But how they were able to navigate those waters is what that report did. But again, the report showed that they had to task themselves that, hey, this I'm going to collect. They took out that money and they used it in paying. So again, if there's no regulatory requirement, that says you must report a breach, that's number one. Number two, are the financial institution operating in the industry, are they collaborating? That's the next keyword, because they see each other as more of competitor.
Rivals, yeah.
And so again, the same, banks in the same financial industry may suffer the same breach. Reason, there's no collaboration. So recently in one forum that I belong to, this is this year, and it has been validated. One of the banks, there was somebody reported a zero exploit. How the bank went about it, whether the individual was rewarded or whether it was penalized, I didn't know. But the individual actually posted a zero exploit that existed even in the web-facing app. Of that bank. So again, these are some of the things. Again, another key thing is that does the financial institution, do they have like a bulk bounty program, which because they can't. The truth must be told, they can't do everything. That's why some advanced countries, the government even have an arm that focuses mainly on bulk bounty, vulnerability management. So again, those are some of the things that I feel, if we want to move forward, and if we want to move forward practically, not just on paper, if we want to move forward practically from the African perspective, these things has to be there. There has to be like a police, so to speak. When I say police, I mean regulators. They have to come alive to their responsibility. For example, how many central bank of the respective countries, how many of them even have bulk bounty program or units
as part of their surveillance or
exactly.
supervisory?
Exactly.
I think that is something that should be implemented now. So when
we
look at the
go ahead, sorry.
When we look at the world last year to this year, when we look at Capital One, Equinox of US, those are big organizations, financial organizations that are compromised. Africans cannot be exempted because we actually borrow those technologies, maybe.
Exactly.
Not even developed locally. So, and those guys even have the FBI trying to protect them, and some other NSA trying to protect them. But who do we have in the region? So today, go on.
Before today response, just to piggyback on what you just said. Again, it has to start with the bank itself. It's not just about the regulators. For example, now you don't wait until you break down before you go to the hospital. Why is it that let's internalize this individually? Some of us we tend to take multivitamins, not because we are sick, but again, it's just so again coming up with these programs, within these individual banks. Again, they may look at it, it's too expensive. It's too this. So are we going to? No. Do you want to become another statistics?
Absolutely.
If yes, now again, I won't stop emphasizing. Look how much the colonial pipeline. They are not bank. They're into oil and gas. So again, the question is, they don't have. Well, they don't have the financial information. Like credit card number, how much, they don't have that, but yet they were still targeted, they were still compromised, and then look at how much they paid in terms of ransom, and these are money that are not traceable. So if an entity within the African setting, again, because we don't even have the data, so for me, that is where we need to start from, the data. It has to be data driven. The regulator has to mandate, whichever industry, you must submit this data where you compromise, and they also must have a way of validating. Otherwise, it'll just be another like a financial audit exercise where anybody can cook up numbers and tell you, oh, my profit before tax, and at the end of the day, months or years down the line, the bank is being heard that they are financially distressed, and the regulator has to try to bail them out. So again, there must be this check and balances.
Absolutely. Babs,
I think you already had the questions I was gonna. You already addressed everything. I think I was gonna say, like in one of the earlier series, we actually mentioned exactly what you meant. Africa, we need to set up our own programs that hunt vulnerabilities and able to assess technologies. We shouldn't just depend on third parties or Europe or the Western world. We should be ensuring we are developing ours, or ensuring that we counter what they've given to us and know that there's no vulnerabilities in them. So that's just something that we highlighted in one of our series already. So it's good to hear you echo the same thoughts. So for me, that's it. I really don't have much. I think you've addressed everything, everything possible. So I don't know if you have any other thing you want to raise, Yemi.
For me, raise when you have been spoken to by a doctor. Come back.
Come on, man. Come on.
Well, it's a good time for me, and I really appreciate that you were here with us. It was really enjoyable. It was really educative, and I believe all our subscribers, especially, I want the CISOs, the CIOs, the security managers to come on board and listen to something like this, because this is a complete paradigm shift. It's not the day-to-day thing that we usually do. This is more like taking it to the level where we have to manage security according to business requirements, not IT stuff anymore. The boss have left the station. So we shouldn't be playing catch up anymore. We should be ahead. And this is the point I think we can actually be ahead. Thank you so much. Babs?
Yeah, I think you've said it again. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Seyi, for gracing us with your occasion and, laying the foundation of knowledge on us. Again, we can't be more grateful for, giving us this, I won't call it training, just knowledge on business security architecture. Like I said, everybody that is in information security, cybersecurity enthusiasts that want to know more, this is definitely something they would definitely appreciate. So we want to say thank you for, first of all, showing up, because I know you're a very busy person. So thank you for showing up. And we look forward again to seeing you. I'm sure you have many more topics you'd want to talk about. And we'll definitely schedule for more talks. Hopefully you'll say yes.
Yeah.
And like I said, thank you very much. And our viewers out there, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram page, Just Unsecure. And if you have any particular topics you all want to want to raise any questions to Dr. Seyi, let us know. You can mail us at juteam@justunsecure.com. Seyi, do you want to say anything to our viewers or anything before we round off?
Well, the only thing I just want to say is thank you for the privilege and the honor of at least having that knowledge sharing on the Just Unsecure platform. It's something that I deeply appreciate. The opportunity and the privilege. Even again, the last word for me is just security is ever evolving, and organizations should not wait until they become another data, another statistics, because the landscape keeps changing. The threat landscape of yesterday is different from today's landscape, and you can be rest assured it's going to be different from tomorrow's landscape. Technology is not a panacea. There's more to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, listeners. And that's it from the JU team. Thank you all.
Bye. Bye.